feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to festival custom. After they had completed its days, and they were returned, the boy Jesus remained behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know him. Thinking that he was in the caravan, they journeyed for a day and looked for him among the relatives and acquaintances. But not finding him, they returned to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were astounded at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been looking for you with great anxiety." And he said to her, "Why are you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. He went down with them and came to Nazareth, and was obedient to them. And his mother kept all these things in her heart. And Jesus advanced in wisdom and age, and favor before God and man. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Feast Day. Feast of the Holy Family. A beautiful thing was happening as the responsorial psalm was being sung. I don't want to put this young man on the spot down here in the first view, but every time we went like this, for people to respond, the young man went like this as he was singing. So I said to Deacon Joe, "You see how beautiful that is?" And Deacon Joe said, "That's Holy Family." Isn't that nice? Thank you, young man. You inspired me on how to begin today's holiday. And it's in all of those little things, right? Even though they're cute, we smile at them and they bring us some sense of warmth. It is in those little things that family is made. This feast day makes us think of many things. Obviously, this parish, right? This is who our namesake is, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. It also reminds us of our own families, families we grew up in, the families that we are rearing now. It reminds us of our extended family, and even friends, even though not maybe related by blood, but related through spirit and fellowship. Before I get into the actual gospel and the reading that I chose to reflect on, I do need to speak about my own family because it's almost been 2 years since I've been here at Holy Family, and I'm still asked all kinds of questions. Father, are you Italian? You're Italian, right, Father? It's like a prerequisite before you become, a priest or a pastor at Holy Family. No, I don't think Father uses Italian. No, he wasn't. There might have been a little Italian in there somewhere. So it's a long story. I'm going to try to bring it down to about 3 minutes. Because people also keep asking me about my sports teams, so they'll make fun of the Giants when they lose. And I'm wondering, why do they do that? So maybe something about me before we go into family. My family is kind of a weird hybrid, if you will. So, they're Croatian by nationality, but both my parents, their birth certificates are in Italian. They're born in 1940. That time, Italy had occupied part of what we would have called Yugoslavia back in those days. And everything was changed into Italian. So my father's Croatian name is Ivan Picinic or Picinic or Picinic. But in the Italian birth certificate it says Giovanni Picini. two names for it. They have a Croatian name, and they have an Italian name. So it depends who you're talking to. The ones who consider themselves to be Croatian, they'll say Susak. And the ones who think they're Italian say Sansico. So they even had two men's clubs on the same street with different names. Because the ones who thought they were Croatian went into this one, the ones who thought they were Italian went into this one. So my father, believe it or not, and my mother to some extent, grew up learning how to speak both languages, both Italian and Croatian. And even their dialect in Croatian has a lot of Italian words. So when we grew up as kids, for instance, on Sunday, if you walk into our house, you would smell the gravy cooking. Right? That's what you call it. See, I've become South Jersey. If my northern New Jersey friends heard that, forget it. Right? And the whole day pasta, and my buddies would come over and eat all this meat that was inside the gravy, and the whole day pasta, and it smelled like an Italian home. Then say after football practice on Tuesday, if a couple of guys came over, my mom was putting out goulash. They were like, what happened from Sunday to Tuesday? Because the culture was mixed. There was some Slavic in it, there was some Italian in it, and I'm not going to explain to you the whole history of that. You can go on Wikipedia now, type in Susak, S-U-S-A-K, and you'll learn the whole history all the way back to the myth and legends of Jason of Argonaut and all that. And it explains how it kind of became a hybrid through the Romans settling there and on. That created a lot of interesting cultures and traditions in my own family. So for instance, we celebrated Christmas twice. I don't know if some of you did that. We would get presents on Christmas. I don't think the parents want me to talk about this because the kids are going to be like, okay, twice? We would also get a bunch of presents again on the Epiphany. How many of you celebrated that back when you were growing up? Just a few hands. You guys like that, huh? More presents next week? No? Okay. All right, so we would do things like that. I remember going to Slavic masses. I remember going to Italian masses growing up. And all of those things helped to mold the traditions and customs within our own families. And I shared this with you, I guess, the year before. We had this beautiful thing that we did in my house. My dad, for my older brother and I, would put in a brown bag some walnuts, some apples, some candies, because that's what he got as a kid. Now, when I preached that, I guess 2 Christmases ago, that Monday I wound up with like 20 bags in the office. They were so kind, but I had to share them all, right? Who's going to eat all those walnuts? So little things like that, and my dad would start off the morning prayers. It would just be he and I in the kitchen at around 6 a.m. And he would do his prayers. I think he was showing off. He would do some prayers in Croatian, some in Italian, and then he even moved to the Latin. I should have used him for my Latin exam when I was in college. He would say to me years later, how many languages do you know? You went to college for 8 years. Like, I know English. I went to 3rd grade. I speak Italian, I speak Croatian, I can speak in Latin, I can speak English, 4 languages. But it's in those little things. And also now the most important, the sports teams, right? I'm again a weird hybrid. I am a Jets fan. J-E-T-S. Not Giants. And a Yankees fan. Usually it's Jets, Mets, Yankees, Giants. It's weird how that happened. I guess the Yankees were winning World Series after World Series, so I abandoned the poor Mets. But I was only 7 years old, so you can forgive me. So, and also, as you know, I'm a big Notre Dame fan. They play January 1st, 1 o'clock versus Ohio State. So, I bring all of that up so that you can recall your own traditions, the customs that are important to you. Remember them today. Remember them today. They are precious. They are wonderful. And though they might be simple and cute, just like the young man here lifting up his arms, it becomes something profound, something deep and impacting and lasting. It is the things that are important to us. So please, Recall all of those times, recall all of those moments, and especially from what we heard today in both our readings. You know, I will have people come to me for confession. I'm not revealing anything out of the seal, if you will. And mostly this is from parents. They're usually 95% identical. Father, I need patience. And in the letter from St. Paul to the Colossians, when he speaks about how we should be as people, he says, put on as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, heartfelt compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. And again, here's a tough one. As the Lord has forgiven you, so must you also do. Put on love, the bond of perfection, and let the peace of Christ control your hearts. Now, I think what happens sometimes, even within our own families, you know, Pope Francis was just here a couple months back, and I'll never forget what he said during the homily at one of the masses. He said, family is so beautiful that within just a couple of minutes from one another, at one time we could be throwing plates at each other, and the next minute we're saying sorry. Think about that. Throwing plates at one another. Now, where did he get that from? Probably from his own family. Somebody may have chucked a plate at someone. Right? And yet, at the same time, we can sit with one another and forgive. But think of all of those beautiful virtues: kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Paul II would often say, the home, the family is a little church. And that is where children first learn the gospel, and that's where they learn it the most. You got to remember, when you come to Mass, the readings only take about 10 minutes. Depending on who's preaching, it can take anywhere between 5 and 15. And they're only in CCD for an hour or two a week. Or if they come in the summer, just for 2 weeks out of the year. So they're going to learn the gospel mostly at home from mom and dad. And they're going to remember, obviously, the prayers and the things that you said. But the most important things they're going to remember are the acts of sacrifice, the acts of kindness, most of all, the acts of patience and love. Patience in terms of being in control, even when the children might not be. Right? And to let things play out. The other thing is also love. Now, love is a two-way street in the sense that sometimes love is hugging, kisses, and being affectionate and all of that. But sometimes love can also be tough. Meaning that you allow young people to go through what they go through. Yes, you support them, but sometimes to let them wrestle with problems that they may encounter. Sometimes what we try to do is, all of us, not only parents, we try to fix things right away, make things easier, or to take away blame or even responsibility. I know, as a former teacher and coach, that the pendulum has swung from one side all the way to the other in this. Somehow we got to try to bring it in the middle. When I was growing up, it was always our fault. Remember those days? And now we've almost swung to the other side where it's never the kid's fault. The truth is what? It's probably somewhere in the middle, right? So again, to bring up people who are of character and discipline is sometimes to let young people struggle. I know I've had friends in the past, even when it comes to sports, the kid loses right away, it's always somebody else's fault. The referee, the coach made the bad call. Let the kid know that they lost. What's the big deal? It's only a game. And yet, if they can't learn from a simple football game that nobody's going to care about 5 years from now, how are they going to react when they're 30 years old at work and their supervisor comes down hard on them? So those are all of the lessons that we learn from family that prepare us to go into adulthood and to be good model citizens and good model Christians. Today also again reminds us of our parish, the beauty of this place. The beauty of this place is obviously in what we can see. All you have to do is look around the altar and all the love and dedication that went into making this place look beautiful for the holidays, for Christmas, New Year's Day, the Mother of God, for the Holy Family, the Epiphany, the Baptism of the Lord. But the heart and soul of Holy Family is you. And that heart and soul comes out in your prayers, it comes out in your singing, it comes out in the decoration of your church, it comes out in the support of your church, it comes out when we ask for help and people come flocking to help us with whatever we are doing, and also obviously in the giving of resources. But I think the special thing about this place is that people feel they're home. And the church is not just my church or Deacon Joe's church. It has to become our church. And I think that's happened in a great many ways that I've experienced in almost the 2 years that I have been here. You can feel it in the conversations. You can feel it in the vibe of the Mass and our celebrations. And also when people speak about this place. There's something cozy about it, right? It almost kind of feels like you're in someone's house. And that's the feeling that you want. And that feeling comes from the people first and foremost. Obviously, the architecture lends to that, but I think it comes from in you. It comes from in you. I'll leave you with one final thing to reflect on. Obviously, none of this would be anything without the Holy Family. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Think about their family and Jesus growing up in that family and the beauty that they shared together, especially their prayer life. Prayers mean so much. I am sure that Mary spent countless hours, Joseph as well, with Jesus, praying over the Torah and the rest of the Hebrew scriptures, and not only just reading them for knowledge, but praying them to Yahweh with heartfelt sincerity, with love in their hearts. That is what makes us strong as a family unit. That is what makes us strong as a parish. So let us always remember our namesake, who we are named after. Let us continue to ask Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Help us to recall our own traditions and customs. Help us to recall the traditions that we have here in our parish.